the channel. My name is Adam Smith, and today in this video we are kicking off the playthrough inside the showcase for Cyberpunk 2077 Gangs of Night City from Come On Games. Very excited to show you guys this. There are a couple of tweaks that I want to make mention of and just some FYIs that are worth knowing when you're going through the single player mode setup. We'll tackle those to start, and then we'll dive right into the very first round of play. I'll show you how things flow and operate. We'll start at a slower pace and pick things up once you become accustomed to the rules. What I'm about to highlight to clarify some of the steps for the single player mode is also mentioned in the pinned comment and video description inside of the how to set up video, but we're going to do it here visually for you. The opposing Edgerunner Johnny Silverhand is going to start in the city center in the POI location. You'll see him right here. Now, the next clarification depends on whether you have the Kickstarter edition or you have the retail edition. If you have the Kickstarter edition like I do, you're going to have the ability when you're choosing your opposing Edgerunner to choose to go with Johnny or potentially one of two V cards. And you'll remember that from the setup video. But once you've selected whichever one you want from the Kickstarter version, because you have some options, then you had to go to the Edgerunner deck and remove specific cards out of it. You'll always be removing this one here, and you're also going to be removing not only the one that you chose, but also the other iterations you didn't choose. Now, if you have the retail version, this is not going to matter. You're only going to have these two to deal with. So long story short, for my Kickstarter edition, I've removed all 4 of those cards. Now, this next clarification is one that's not specified specifically inside the rulebook, and it's easy to miss, but what you're going to want to do is ensure you remove from the combat deck the upgrade cards you have up there, that red deck, 6 of the smart weapon prototype cards. As you'll see in the top right-hand corner, these are for a specific story, and they're not used in every single story you're going to play, so make sure these are removed. Now, you know that you've taken the Arasaka card out of the opportunity deck. If you take a look in the components section of the rulebook, you'll see that all 6 of these and this card here are mentioned as story cards. In other words, they're only going to apply and be in part of the decks when they are actually being used for the story they're connected to. Now let's move on to the opposing gang. Something I want to mention is the fact that in the setup picture for the solo mode, you'll notice that there's drone tokens for the opposing gang. It's not specifically written in the setup instructions, so it can be missed, but it is worth mentioning that when you put out techies, they're going to come with a drone, so get those drone tokens for the opposing gang out. And something else that will help you when it comes to recruiting units from this opposing gang is to actually put them in the order of the behavior card. So once you know which opposing gang you're going up against, you have that card face up, it will tell you that the recruiting priority is netrunners first, then solo, and then techie. So I've done exactly that, placed them in columns from left to right. And last but not least, a nice FYI, but most people will probably notice this when they open up the game board. As it is double-sided, you're going to need to know which side you're playing on, and you'll find a 1 to 3 player mentioned in the top right-hand corner of the board. And if you flip it over, it's for the higher player count. So when you're playing solo, this is the side you want. And that, my friends, covers all the clarifications and small things you might want to think about while setting up for single player mode. Of course, some of these might actually be introduced in the online rulebook in the future or through an FAQ, as Come On typically does. Without further ado, we are ready to dive into our very first round of play. But before we do that, let's set the stage by reading the story card. I moved the story card from its top position so you can see it a little easier. It's called Fine Before You Came. Word on the street is that some Borg with an insane arsenal of weapons is going around zeroing out folks all over the city. Rumor is that they're somehow tied to rockstar legend and terrorist Johnny Silverhand. The last thing we need is everyone arming up like Max Tack, scared of this monster. Unless, while they're distracted with Rocker Boy, we use this chance to control the underground of Night City once and for all. Sounds good, eh? On the opposite side of the story card, we see 3 new rules for this story and this solo epilogue in the bottom right-hand corner. It's worth mentioning new rules that are found on the story card supersede anything in the rulebook and any game component you have out on the table. So keep these ones top of mind. Let's go through them. The first rule states to ignore all effects that interact with an opponent's hand or opposing gang resources. A very high-level rule, should be easy to keep top of mind. Next rule says the opposing Edgerunner, which in this case is Johnny Silverhand, cannot be killed. Ignore all effects that would kill them. They are considered an involved opposing unit in firefights occurring in their district. So the opposing Edgerunner cannot be killed, which means you're going to be mitigating what he can potentially do. And as you start to see the game unfold, you'll see exactly what he can do and what he's capable of. And it is pretty terrifying how fast he can start ramping up the street cred. And also, combat-wise, he's an absolute beast. And in the top right hand corner, the final rule says to refill the opportunity and Edgerunner market slots at the end of your turn and each enemy activation if needed. So if any slots are available, you're going to populate them with cards. In the bottom right-hand corner, we find out the win and loss conditions of the story, which state when any faction, gang, or Edgerunner reaches or surpasses 25 street cred, the game ends. If you don't have the highest street cred, you lose the game. So for this particular one, very straightforward, it is a race to 25. Now, while the objectives seem very straightforward, how you actually get to 25 street cred becomes quite the web of different moves and strategies you're going to need to pull off, on top of the fact you're dodging wrenches that the AI is going to be throwing at you throughout the entire experience. Now, just before I go ahead with my very first turn, and yes, we get to go first as a solo player, you look at the turn summary reference and the single player mode summary card to get an idea as to when things trigger and how things flow. I'll be walking through all this stuff with you guys. On the opposite side of these cards is additional information around the actions you can take. I'll show you those in a second, and some other information. Now, it's worth mentioning an example of where the story card that we read earlier had a tweak to a rule that currently exists. Here's a great example. It says right here, after every enemy activation, refill the opportunity and Edgerunner market slots if needed. But the story card states you're doing that, plus you're doing it at the end of every turn. So every time I'm done my turn, I'll also be replenishing things. The opposite side of the turn summary reference has a really handy action disc reference as well, so you get a good high-level idea as to what each of these different actions you can take do. At the very bottom, you'll notice a wild symbol allowing you to do any one of these again. Without further ado, let's dive into my very first turn. I have the choice to activate or reclaim. Now, activating will allow me to use one or two of the action discs, which is very different than most games where you have a set amount of actions. This one, you can move between two different options. You can do one on one turn, and another turn you might choose to do two for whatever strategic reason you're trying to accomplish. Now, on the reclaim side of the equation, if you choose to do that, you're restoring all your used action discs, which you've already previously used, if there are any, and then you're going to gain district rewards and you're going to recruit units. Now, you might think that that bottom one, the second option, is just something you'll do once you kind of burn through all your actions, but you'll be very surprised how strategic the decision is as to when to reclaim and also how often to reclaim, especially when you're playing the single player mode. It really does matter, and I'm going to give you a hint and a little bit of a heads up that it matters even more so when you're going up against Johnny Silverhand as the opposing Edgerunner. When one is complete, you move on to two to refill Edgerunners and opportunities as needed, those slots on the game board, if there's any openings, and then you check story triggers. Now, as I'm playing with the Tiger Claws gang, they do have a revenge and payback situation going on their dashboard. I'm not going to get into it right now. You can see it if you want, pause the screen and read it, but I will show you exactly how it flows and operates once we actually run into it during gameplay. So we want to decide what to do first. Well, the best thing to do is likely look at the position of our units on the game board currently, look at the actions we have available to us, check out the Edgerunner cards and opportunity cards, and always keep top of mind how much money and contraband we have. Now, you may be wondering what the giant column is on the left-hand side of the game board. There's the Netrunner activation there, Techie activation, and that has the Edgerunner and opportunity cards underneath of it. For now, we'll just talk quickly about the Netrunner activation. Really, all you need to know here is if you choose to use the blue action disc and do the activating of Netrunner units, then you're going to have the opportunity to do a net run. You'll do it here. It's also worth mentioning, you'll see at the very, very top, a data fortress is not required. You don't have to control one. That's the first line at the very top, right underneath Netrunner activation. You do not need to control a data fortress on the game board in order to do a net run. I'll show you exactly how this works in action when we do our very first net run. Moving down the column on the game board, you'll see the Techie activation. If we choose to use this action disc as one of our two actions, we're going to interact with this Techie activation after we've moved our Techies and drones on the game board. And here you have the opportunity, as you can see here, you need control of a fixer in order to actually do this, but you can go ahead and spend money in order to acquire other units that can come into play and benefit you. Another option for the Techie activation, which is the green action disc, is instead of going after an Edgerunner, you can choose to go after an opportunity. Again, you still need control of something. In this case, you need control of a business. So at a high level, we've touched on the activating of Techie units, which is the green action disc, the activating of Netrunner units, which is the blue action disc. The orange one here allows you to activate your solo units, and they are going to initiate firefights in the districts that they head towards. So they're all about combat. That's enough of an understanding of the top 3 action discs. We'll talk more about the rest of them in a little bit. Let's now get into the gameplay. You'll start to see how these things work. As I'm choosing to do an activate rather than a reclaim, I can choose 1 or 2 action discs to resolve. As I alluded to earlier, as you become experienced with the gameplay, you'll know certain areas of the board you should be looking at in order to try to accomplish certain goals. But when you're playing for the very first time, not all of that is going to be completely obvious. And so the best thing to do is really just to start taking different actions, seeing how the ripple effects of those actions pan out, and then your strategy will really start to come together after about 5 turns or so. Once you've seen about 5 of the actions out of the 6, you have seen everything there is to offer action-wise, and then you can really start to see how things actually interact with each other, and also how the opposing Edgerunner and opposing gang is going to interact with you and cause grief for you. Inside my starting district of Westbrook, I have 4 units and 1 hideout. The hideout is right here. 4 units are these right here. We have the solo unit, the drone, the Techie. The Techie, when it comes into play, comes with a drone, and the Netrunner. Now, in terms of where the enemies currently are, we have Johnny sitting in a POI location in City Center, and this icon right here is for a business. And as we talked about before, if I ever take a Techie activation and I have control of a business of that POI location, then I can potentially go after opportunities. So that's one I really got my eye on. Other types of POI locations include things like the Fixer up here. If we get control of a Fixer, then the Techie on its activation can go after Edgerunners. The final POI type is a Data Fortress, which is actually right inside of Westbrook. We happen to get somebody in there controlling that. It's going to benefit us when our Netrunner starts to do net runs. Now, as you move around the game board, you're also going to see resources depicted in each district. We're going to talk more about that later on. That comes back to presence or dominance in specific areas. And of course, that's going to be an ongoing fight throughout the game, but can generate a lot of resources or a little bit of resources depending on which category you're in. Something I really want you to keep an eye on when you're playing the game, especially for the first time, is the opportunity area. These are some of the ones you're going to want to target out of the gates to really get a handle on things. There's also combat card upgrades. That is another action disc you're going to want to focus on, especially if you're going up against Johnny Silverhand, as he is a powerhouse in terms of combat, and you're going to want to try and find better action combat cards than you currently start with. So looking ahead at opportunities here, we have the Nakodo weapons shipment, we have the synth coke deal, and we have the budget arms disposables. You always want to keep an eye on the cost, in this case the cost being contraband. I do have 2 contraband to start the game off, so I could potentially go after any of these, but you also need to make sure that you meet the requirements. Now, some of them don't have any requirements, so that's very nice. Other ones do. You'll need to have specific things accomplished in order to actually seize that opportunity. So you'll need dominance in Pacifica, which is going to be very hard, seeing as Pacifica is where the enemy gang starts, so that's probably not happening anytime soon. And the budget arms disposables down here, you need dominance in Haywood, which is far more possible. My first action is going to be to do a Techie activation. So this allows me to move all Techies and all drones. And as the rules state that the drone needs to end up in an area where there is another unit that is not a drone, I need to move it into the same space, because if I happen to move my drone, say, to Haywood or over here in Santo Domingo or somewhere else like Watson above to the north, that drone is going to disappear because nobody's controlling it. So I have to move it into there for now. But I could have also just chosen to leave it inside of Westbrook, but I'm going to bring it with me. Now, the other thing you noticed is I've pushed Johnny out of the POI location. So when you enter a district, you have the opportunity to move straight into the POI, or you can just move into the district if you wish. Techies and drones have moved. We can choose to seize something. I cannot seize an Edgerunner because I don't have control of a Fixer, but I do have control of a business. So I can go after an opportunity. I'm going to go after this synth coke deal right here, spending 2 contraband. So I've seized that opportunity, and it tells me right now, when seized, what do I get? Well, I gain 1 street cred for each one of these brain dance deals that I have. Then you may move up to 3 friendly units, and it's that second portion that was really awesome. I gained my very first street cred, and I can move up to 3 friendly units. The first 2 units have moved. The solo unit is now inside of Haywood in the POI location, the data warehouse, and also the Netrunner came down from Westbrook into the Fixer location inside of Santo Domingo. And it is worth mentioning, because it's way down the bottom right-hand corner, the resources gathered in this area is contraband. There's 2 icons of contraband down the bottom right-hand corner. And I can move up to 3 units, so let's move the drone into a zone with another unit, because remember, so long as a drone lands in a space with a friendly unit, it can still exist. units. One action complete. We could do a second one or stop right there. I'm going to probably do a second one, but let's talk about the two actions I haven't touched on yet, at least in terms of their requirements. If we wish to try and upgrade a combat card, and combat cards are across the bottom here, I have the basic ones to start, we would use this red action disc to do so, but that is going to cost us contraband. It's one contraband to do that upgrade, and I don't currently have any because I just burnt it all recently, so that's not even an option for me right now. The other one here is to build a hideout, the white one. If I choose to do this, I need to spend the associated euro-dollar cost over here, which is 2. I don't have that. I only have 1, but once I do, I can place one of these hideout tokens on the game board. Underneath of these tokens are rewards potentially. This one has nothing, but as you go up, you start gaining street cred in increasing amounts. What's cool about hideouts is they can be placed anywhere in any district, regardless of what's going on unit-wise, friendly or not friendly. I'm going to choose to take that second action, and I've also gone ahead and adjusted just where the tokens sit. I'm going to use them kind of in a column formation, so I'm pulling down the wild one here as my second action in order to do another techie activation. I'm choosing not to move my techie or my drones in any way, shape, or form. I do have full control of a fixer location, which allows me to go after an Edgerunner if I wish, and also the opportunities if I want. But I know I want an Edgerunner, so we're going to spend the €1 that I have here in order to pick up William Hare. When you hire an Edgerunner, you go ahead and place it near your dashboard. You're also going to find the corresponding miniature, which will match the artwork on the card itself. Then take one of your colored bases and place it on the bottom. Now it's time to go ahead and actually bring it into play. For me, I only have one option because I only have one hideout. That is where newly recruited units and units you have in your reserve are going to come into play, is wherever there are hideouts, which is the benefit of getting them out across the game board. A couple things to keep top of mind when you bring a unit into a district with a hideout is the fact you want to take a look at the card for the Edgerunner you just hired, and underneath its name, it'll tell you what type of unit it is. They're all Edgerunners, but it could be a solo Edgerunner, a netrunner Edgerunner, or a techie Edgerunner. And if it's a techie one, you're going to need to bring a drone in as well. This one is a solo Edgerunner, so we've already done everything we need to do. Now, the other thing is you do not bring any newly placed units into a district straight into an empty POI location. You are not able to do that. It goes into the district itself. Later, with movement, you can go into a POI location. That's going to do it for my first player turn. At this point, we're going to replenish any gaps inside the Edgerunner area and the opportunity area. 2 new cards are in play. You'll see icons in the top left-hand corner of all these opportunity cards letting you know what type they are. So I've already acquired the Brain Dance deal. There are weapon deals, which have the bullets or ammunition icons. And then you also have these cyberware deals, which is the one I just got now, called Cybered Up. This one also has no requirements. It tells me down below when seized. We're going to gain street cred for each one of the cyberware deals we have, then gain street cred for every 2 hideouts you have in play, rounded down. So a lot of these opportunities, depending on how you strategize and how you build things out as you go through the game, can really start pulling in a lot of street cred. So you want to start building towards some of these combinations, knowing full well, though, that the enemies are going to mess with this area, so they're not always going to stay put for long. And the new Edgerunner we could hire is Lyle Thompson, a solo Edgerunner. The ability trigger says, involved in a firefight where any opposing unit was lost, then you gain some street cred. Now, as I alluded to earlier in the game, when you're on your player turn, you pick whether you want to activate or whether you want to reclaim. This is why it matters in the solo player mode, because as you can see, after you activate, which is what I just did, we're activating the opposing Edgerunner in one random district. Whereas if I chose to do a reclaim on my turn, instead, we would actually be activating the opposing gang in 3 random districts, resolving each district in order. So, strategy-wise, what you choose in terms of each of those options on your player turn has a direct impact on who is coming after you next. So because we chose to activate Johnny Silverhand, the opposing Edgerunner is going to activate. We're going to go to the district deck, which is a random deck of all the districts in the game, of which there are 6. Draw one off the top and find out where he's headed. Looks like Johnny is heading north to Watson, and it's worth mentioning anytime you draw cards after resolving them from the district deck, make sure to shuffle them right back in. The deck is always supposed to be replenished and be ready for another random draw. It's not specifically mentioned in the rulebook anywhere to do this, but make sure you do. So we'll move Johnny's figure from City Center to Watson. If the point of interest is empty in that district, he'll move right into it. Otherwise, he'll just head into the district. Now what happens next with Johnny is all dependent on who's in the district that he moves into. And in this case, he's completely alone. And when he moves into a district when he's completely alone, he gains 3 street cred, and you remove all the face-up opportunity cards in the market from the game. So way at the top of the board is street cred. Currently, Johnny has 3, I have 1, and the opposing gang has 0. Also, Johnny has gone ahead and discarded every single opportunity, the face-up cards on the bottom left. They are all removed from the game. So basically, what he's doing is he's waltzing in there, he's getting a bunch of street cred, and he's destroying any potential strategy you had with going after any of those cards in the future. There are 2 other possible outcomes that could have happened when Johnny moved into Watson. If there happened to have been any units from the opposing gang, Johnny would walk in and wipe out all of the units that are inside of Watson. He would take 4 street cred, and then he would remove the topmost face-up opportunity card. The final outcome that could have happened is if my units had been in the district, then he would go right into a firefight with me, and that's with or without the opposing gang being in there as well. So in other words, if the opposing gang's in there and I'm in there, it's a full-on brawl between all 3 of us. With Johnny's turn all wrapped up, we now need to populate the opportunities that were taken away by him. We ended up with Corpware Augmentations, with the XBD Dealer, and Chippin' In. So at this point, you've now seen a player turn where I chose to activate, and because I chose to activate, it then went ahead and activated Johnny, the opposing Edgerunner. Now it comes back to me, and I choose again. Do I want to activate or do I want to reclaim? And again, depending on which one I choose, that's going to determine who's going to activate afterwards. And I am eyeing up reclaiming because I'm looking at my units and where they're at on the board, and I have a lot of presence across the board. I also have dominance up there in Westbrook because I also have a hideout, and you have to have a hideout established as well as having the most units in a given district in order to have dominance there. The other places, I just have presence because I have no hideouts. When you decide to reclaim on your turn, you can take a look at your dashboard. It will literally walk you through the steps of what to do. The first thing is to recover all your used action discs. So those are going to go back up to the top row. The second step is about gaining resources based on whether you have presence or whether you have dominance. If you have presence, you can choose from the available resources inside of a district. If you have dominance, you get everything that that district has to offer. So we'll start resolving the districts one by one. We'll take a look at Westbrook first, and because I know that's my starting zone, I know I have a hideout there, which means I can go after dominance so long as I have the most units there. And I do. There's no other units there to contest with me, so that gives me dominance there, allowing me to take both of the resources, the Eurodollar as well as the street cred. So the Tiger Claws is going to gain that 1 token up there in the top left, and my street cred is going to go up to 2. So as you can see, having dominance is very, very beneficial. And if you can get yourself in a situation where you have the most units, as well as having that hideout, you are going to be in good shape for gathering lots of resources when you go through a reclaim during your turn. Now let's move on to resolving the rest of the districts. We have a city center location with one of my units inside of it, and you'll notice there is no hideout. So immediately I know I cannot have dominance in this location. There is no chance for that. So at this point I have 1 unit in here, whether it's inside the POI or inside the district, doesn't matter. I just have a single unit. And when you have presence, by having a single unit inside of a district, you're going to gain 1 of the resources that are available. So we get to choose between 1 of these 3. Now let's quickly talk about a situation where you have an actual hideout and a unit inside of a district like we did with Westbrook. So here we are in the city center. I've placed a hideout here. So now we'd actually be going after dominance. And in this situation, I'd be able to take all the resources. But let's say hypothetically, the opposing gang also had a single unit in this location. Just by the opposing gang having a single unit in here, we no longer have the most units because remember, hideouts do not count as units. So it's just 1 for 1, which means both have presence, which means both would gain resources, but as per the special rules of the scenario, the opposing gang doesn't gain any resources. And as you're playing the single player mode, Johnny, the opposing Edgerunner, and the Voodoo Boys, the opposing gangs, will never gain any resources because they don't utilize them on their turn. So that reclaim action can be very powerful in the right situation, right time frame. If you can get yourself with the highest number of units and a hideout in a district, you can really start pulling in resources. Now that you know how that operates, let's go ahead and resolve the rest of the districts. So city center here, I'm going to choose to take 1 contraband because I have presence. Haywood, I'm going to take 1 Eurodollar, and down here, I'm going to take 1 contraband. I know it's hard to see the resources for that one. They're buried in the bottom right-hand corner. This area right here, Santo Domingo, it has 2 contraband, so I'm only selecting contraband as that's my only option anyway. So at the end of gathering resources, we got 2 Eurodollar tokens and 2 contraband tokens. Pretty good overall. Wish I had a little more dominance in these districts to pull in tons of resources, but it is early in the game. At this point, we do the final step of the reclaim, which is a great one, and now you can fully see the benefits of hideouts, and that is to recruit 1 unit for every hideout in play. So the more of these hideouts you get out, not only do they give you the ability to potentially get dominance if you have the most units in a district and be able to gobble up all the resources, but on top of that, every time you reclaim at the very last step, you're going to be bringing in a unit to each one of them, which is really going to bolster your gang across the city. And remember, when you place these hideouts across the board, they can literally go anywhere. You don't have to have a unit or any kind of presence or dominance in any of those districts to place one of the hideouts. Once you build that hideout, it goes where you want. I've chosen to recruit the Techie, and every single time you recruit a Techie, you're going to bring in a drone as well. And don't forget, that drone counts as a unit, so it's very handy for upping the amounts of units inside of a district. That wraps up my player turn. If there's any empty slots in the Edgerunner column or in the opportunity column for cards, you're going to populate those now. There were none because I didn't interact with either of them. So we move on to what happens next. Well, because I chose to reclaim, that is going to have the opposing gang trigger for the very first time. We'll get to see how they operate. When the opposing gang activates, you're going to go to the district deck and you're going to draw 3 cards off the top. Again, always make sure that deck has been shuffled up. There shouldn't be anything in a discard pile for that random district deck. You're going to draw them in order from left to right, and you're going to start resolving them left to right. We'll start in Pacifica. To resolve the district card, you're going to go through 2 steps. The first one is to recruit a unit based on the behavior card and the recruiting priority, which in this case is Netrunners first. So a Netrunner unit is going to go into Pacifica. If you don't have a Netrunner unit, then you just move to the next one in line, which would be Solo. And if you don't have that, then you head on to Techies. And if you don't have any units in your reserve for the opposing gang will gain 1 Street Cred for each revealed district card where they don't have presence. So a new Netrunner unit showing up in Pacifica. And the second step after recruiting the unit is to check if we have presence. And if we don't have presence there, which we don't, the opposing gang gains 2 Street Cred. Then they shuffle all the Edgerunner cards in the market and place them at the bottom of the Edgerunner deck. So they're going to mess with things. You do not refill the Edgerunner market until the end of your next activate. So all the Edgerunners have been taken away, and they're not going to come back until the end of our next activate on our player turn. And also they gain 2 Street Cred, which ties us up top. That's 1 district resolve. We move on to the next one, which is Santo Domingo, which is this one down here in the bottom right. We're going to recruit a unit for the opposing gang. We do have an Edgerunner in the reserve, so that is the one that comes in. We now move into step number 2 for this district, and that is to check presence. And I do have presence here. So when I do have presence, you check to see the opposing gang unit's type, which in this case is a Netrunner. And what we're going to do is move back the net step, which is way up in the top left-hand corner, and then the Netrunner activation. That token goes back 1 step, and the opposing gang gains 2 Street Cred. The Street Cred of the opposing gang has jumped from 2 to 4 and is now in the lead across the board. Also, you'll see the net up there with the token on the start position. That is the token you're supposed to move back 1 position, but because we have not made any runs on the net yet, nothing here is going to change. So you've now seen one of the 3 possibilities that can happen when a new recruit from the opposing gang comes into a district and you have presence there. So what would happen in the other 2 cases? Well, let's say this one that came in actually ended up being a Techie unit. In that case, you can choose to lose a resource, or the opposing gang is going to gain 3 Street Cred, and then they're going to remove the topmost face-up opportunity card in the market from the game. Now, let's say that this was a solo unit that came in instead. The opposing gang initiates a firefight in those cases. The final district to resolve is Haywood, so 1 unit being recruited by the Voodoo Boys into that district, and it's going to be a solo unit because there's no Netrunners left, so we go to the next one in the recruitment priority order. And we do have presence inside of Haywood, so because it is a solo unit coming in from the opposing gang, it's going to initiate a firefight with us. We're going into combat right now. So we're involved in a firefight with the Voodoo Boys. Let's take a look at our combat cards because we need to select 1 first. So we got 4 here. They're all the starting cards. There is an action disc which allows you to do an upgrade of a combat card so you can get better ones. But let's go over what we have here. So this icon is for firepower. So this one has 1, this one has 2, this one has 2, and the final one here has 3. So Crusher is the best in terms of the 4 starting ones for firepower, but down below you'll also see a Street Cred condition, which if triggered is going to give you Street Cred. So this one here for Crusher, for instance, says you get a Street Cred if you didn't lose any units. This one here, Street Cred if an opponent lost any non-drone units. This one is a Street Cred if an opponent lost any drone units. And this one is a Street Cred if you have no units left in the district. So I'm choosing to use the Crusher card, which is going to hopefully give me a better chance of winning the firefight. And then you want to also take a look at the dashboard for your gang to make sure there's nothing there that can potentially boost or trigger or some kind of benefit that can come from that. This one's payback. It says when initiating a firefight, and we didn't initiate this one, so we're not going to get that. The second paragraph here says during a reclaim, you may recruit revenge tokens if you don't have enough units in your reserve. This is something that ties into this revenge one over here. And again, we'll see this later on. Maybe when I start losing units, I can show you how that operates. Right now, it doesn't apply. With our card selected, the opposing gang draws 2 cards off the top of the combat deck at the very top of the game board where it states upgrade cards. And these cards are going to have icons on them as well, just like the one I've played. And as you can see, we've got one with a question mark, and that means 0 in this case, and another one with a single firepower. Well, for the opposing gang, you're going to take the highest of the 2, and that's going to be the firepower. So in this case, they only got a 1, so we have more firepower. And just a quick mention for the opposing gang, you don't have to worry about any special effects or any street cred conditions on the bottom of their cards. The only thing you care about is the actual firepower value. However, when comparing, you do want to keep an eye on any Edgerunner abilities or any gang abilities that might apply during this step, or even up at the story card, there could be something. So I'm very happy to win my first firefight. The Tiger Claws taking out the Voodoo Boys 3-1 in the firepower department. But let's say hypothetically, as we move into the casualty step next, let's say the Voodoo Boys actually won this and had higher firepower than we did. If they did, we would lose a unit in the district and they would gain 3 street cred. And if, of course, the opposing Edgerunner was part of this equation, being Johnny, then nothing would happen to Johnny, because remember, Johnny does not die. Now, on the other side of the equation is what's actually happening, which is we had the higher firepower, so we win. And because of this, they must lose a drone unit if they have one, which they don't. Otherwise, we get to decide whatever unit we want to take out. Well, it's going to be the solo unit because that's the only one that they have. And again, if Johnny was part of things when we won, again, nothing would happen to him. Next, for all the combat cards that were used for the opposing gang, you're going to shuffle them up and place them at the bottom of the combat card deck. For the one that we used, we're going to actually place it in our discard pile. The one combat card I just used is in the discard, and I have 3 others available. And it's worth mentioning if a player has no combat cards left in their hand, so once I've actually used the other 3 that are upright, then after or any time outside of a firefight, they retrieve all the played combat cards from their own discard pile back. That's going to do it for the opposing gang activation. The 3 district cards that we drew up go back into the district deck, and it's all shuffled up. It's now my turn again, and it's worth mentioning I do not get to replenish the Edgerunners in that column up there in the top left until the end of my activation, thanks to the gang basically taking all of those options away from me for this given turn. I'm going to choose to go with an activate this time around. We're going to go ahead and we're going to build ourselves a hideout. It's going to cost us 2 in order to take the hideout that's right here. You take the leftmost one first. It's not going to generate any kind of benefit, but you'll see as we go down, we potentially can gain some street cred. This is going to cost 2, and that's all I have, which is perfect. Let's get a hideout placed. I've chosen to build my hideout in Haywood. I think this is a decent decision. I've got 2 units in there, which gives me a great chance at having dominance here. And I'm going to choose to take a second action. It's going to be to upgrade a combat card. You get to see this for the first time. It costs 1 contraband to do it. So you draw 2 upgrade combat cards from the deck. I got myself Mech Looter and M2067 Defender. And I really think the one on the right is going to be the one I need just from the firepower perspective. That'll give me a card that is very, very useful in heavy firefights. So we'll take this one. I do like both of these in terms of what's going on the bottom of the card, but that firepower is pretty nice. When you gain a new combat card, you have to swap it out with a card that's in your hand, so it has to be one of these 3 in my case. You cannot swap it out with anything in your discard pile. It is worth mentioning, I completely forgot to trigger this street cred condition after winning that battle that I had. It says I get a street cred if you didn't lose any units, which I didn't, so I should be at 3 instead of 2. So as you can see, upgrading combat cards will certainly give you better options when you get into firefights. And way up there on the street cred track, I'm also in the 3rd position now, tied with Johnny Silverhand. After choosing to activate and taking 2 actions, my turn is now done, and at the end of my turn, I can replenish the Edgerunners. Here are the new Edgerunners we could potentially hire. They're both costing €2 each, and you'll see if you pause the screen, the ability triggers as well as the ability effects for each of them. And as you've seen before, when we choose to activate on our player turn, the opposing Edgerunner is going to get to go, and that is Johnny, so we're drawing 1 card from the district pile. Well, 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 look at this. Looks like Johnny's heading all the way to the complete opposite side of the map in Santo Domingo, and we have ourselves a unit as well as the opposing gang being in this location. Johnny arrives in Santo Domingo, and if the point of interest or the POI is empty, he'll jump right into it. If it's not, he goes right into the district. As we talked about previously, Johnny will do 3 different things depending on which units are inside the district he moves into. In the past, he moved into one that was alone, and he simply just took some street cred, and he completely wiped out all of the opportunity cards. But here, he's walking in to a district with a bunch of other individuals. So one of the criteria is if there are units that are ours that are present, and if there is, he's going to just initiate a firefight with everybody involved in the district, and that's exactly what's happening. I'm going to use my most recently upgraded combat card, the M2067 Defender, which comes in with 5 firepower, which is quite high. Now at this point, we're going to draw cards for not only the opposing Edgerunner, but also for the opposing gang. The opposing Edgerunner in combat gets 3 cards drawn from the combat deck, whereas the opposing gang gets 2, and of course it's the highest one that counts. In this case, it doesn't matter because neither of them are going to get a higher card than what I threw out there. So I won the firefight, and my M2067 Defender took out the Netrunner, so that Netrunner unit is back to the reserve. And again, Johnny Silverhand can't be defeated, so stays put. The street cred condition on my card states that I get a street cred if an opponent lost any units, so I do gain 1, taking me from 3 to 4. So currently I'm at 4 street credit, tied with the opposing gang also having 4, and Johnny Silverhand has 3. I'm very happy that I upgraded my combat card when I did, and let's talk about a hypothetical situation where Johnny comes into the district like he did. He's also initiating the fight like he did, but this time he has more firepower than everybody else in the district. What happens? Well, he wipes out all the units in that district, so that's pretty nasty. So he can just come in and just destroy anything you've currently got built in there. But what's even nastier is then his street credit condition would trigger, and it's right here. It says if you have less firepower than Johnny, he gains street cred equal to the sum of the firepower of all of his combat cards. And when he's drawing 3 combat cards for a firefight, that can potentially be a ton of street credit. So this is where, when you're thinking about whether you activate or whether you reclaim, remember every single time you choose to activate, you are going to be activating Johnny. And Johnny's going to be wanting to get this thing triggered as often as humanly possible because it's going to potentially give him huge street credit points. You can lose the game very, very fast going up against Johnny if you are not focused on mitigating the combat losses and also triggering him too often. That will put you in a situation you will not be able to catch up on. It's now our player turn. We choose to activate or reclaim, but first let's take a high-level look at the actions we've already covered so far. So wild is pretty obvious. You can just do one of these other actions again. You also have the ability to upgrade combat cards. You have seen this already. The ability to build hideouts. You have seen this. The ability to activate techies, which is the green one. You have seen that, but you have not seen me take the orange or blue disc actions yet. So that is the Netrunner one, and this one is activating solos. Now, activating solos is very easy. You'll just use that disc, activate your solo units, and then you're going to initiate a firefight in a district. So essentially, by seeing multiple firefights so far, you've already got a gist as to what this will do. But the Netrunner one we haven't done yet, and I'm going to aim to do it in the future. I'm going to go ahead and choose to reclaim this time around, so all our action discs are coming back. We also are going to gain 1 resource from any district with a presence, and we're going to gain all the resources from districts that we have dominance. And we now have dominance in Haywood as well as Westbrook. So I placed the resources that I've chosen to gather from each of the 4 districts right here. And I've got a Eurodollar here. We're also taking the street cred up here because we have dominance in this area thanks to having the most units and a hideout. Over here in City Center, I've chosen the contraband because we just have presence. We do not have a hideout there. Here we have presence, but we do have a hideout, so we get full dominance. We get both the Eurodollars. They're right here. And then down here, we only have presence in Santo Domingo, so we're going to choose to take contraband because that is the only option. There is 2 contraband to be taken from here if we ever get dominance. So we are now officially in first place with 5 street cred, opposing gang has 4, and Johnny Silverhand has 3. And you can see all our action discs are back at the very top. Also, we have a total of 3 contraband now and a total of 3 Eurodollars now. And at this point, we now can recruit a unit at each hideout that we have in play. So 1 unit coming to Haywood and 1 to Westbrook. I've chosen to bring in 2 Netrunners, so all 3 of the Netrunners that come as part of the Tiger Claws are in play. 2 of them you can see that just showed up. The other one is down here in Santo Domingo in the POI. That wraps up my player turn. Now we move to the opposing gang. We're going to draw 3 district cards. The Voodoo Boys are going to have interactions with Pacifica, Watson, and City Center. Pacifica is going to get a Netrunner. We now check to see whether we have presence there, and we absolutely do not have presence here. So because of that, they're going to go ahead and deplete all the Edgerunners from these slots, shuffling them and placing them at the bottom of the Edgerunner deck. And again, this cannot be filled again until the end of our next activate. So also what's happening here is they're gaining 2 Street Cred, which is going to hop them right over top of us from 4 to 6. We're currently at 5. We move on to the next district card, which is Watson, and we're going to have a solo unit coming out as no more net runners are available for the Voodoo Boys. And as we have no presence in this location, if there were any Edgerunner cards to actually get rid of and put to the bottom of the deck, they would do it, but we just did it moments ago for not having presence the last time, but they gain another 2 Street Cred, bringing them up to a total of 8. One correction for the unit I just placed on the Voodoo Boys behavior card, it states to recruit inside of a point of interest whenever possible. In other words, if it's open, it's going to take it. And the final solo Edgerunner for the Voodoo Boys goes to City Center. We now check for presence, and I do have a unit there, and because the unit that came in is a solo one, it's going to initiate a firefight. Now, as I haven't upgraded a number of combat cards, I'm starting to get some of them that are a little weaker. This one has 2 for the firefight, and down below says I'll gain some Street Cred if an opponent lost any non-drone unit. So if I can actually win this and take this unit out, I'll get a Street Cred, which will be nice. And unfortunately, this time around, the opposing gang, the Voodoo Boys, were able to easily take me out, with their highest card being 4 firepower. So the opposing gang, when they win a firefight, they're not only going to take out one of your units, and only have 1 there to choose from, so it has to be the Techie. They're also going to gain 3 on the Street Cred track. They are really starting to jump out in front with 11. Now the Tiger Claws have something interesting on their dashboard that is worth checking out. It's called Revenge. It says when you lose a basic unit in a firefight, choose an involved opponent to keep that unit near their reserve as a revenge token. So why would you want to do this? Well, it spells it out right here, payback. And who doesn't want to get some payback and some revenge against somebody who's hurt them? This one says, when initiating a firefight in the future, you must retrieve all revenge tokens from all involved opponents. Then, during the compare firepower step, you add 1 firepower for each retrieved token. If an opposing unit is lost at the end of this firefight, you gain 2 Street Cred. And it also says, during a reclaim, you may recruit revenge tokens if you don't have units in your reserve. So in other words, if you're trying to do this revenge thing by putting these tokens of lost units on other players' dashboards for safekeeping, and by safekeeping I mean payback in the future, and you run out of individuals in your reserve to actually place out during a reclaim, you can go and snag them at any point in time if you wish. So this ability is actually really beneficial, especially when you're playing in the single player mode, because this can ramp up your overall firepower quite quickly. So the Tiger Claws are not going to forget what was done to them by the Voodoo Boys. So with combat complete and the end of the opposing gang's turn, I have shuffled the district deck. I've placed the cards that the opposing gang used for combat. They were shuffled and placed at the bottom of the combat deck. For me, I put my combat card in the discard pile. I only have 1 active in-hand combat card right now that I can use in the future. Once that's used, then I can go ahead and replenish all 4 of my combat cards back in my hand. So we're going to move into a player turn. For this player turn, I'm going to choose to activate, and I'm going to activate my Techie units. This allows me to move all my Techies and all my drones. We'll have a Techie coming from Westbrook into City Center to take the POI. The drone inside of Westbrook moved down to Santo Domingo, and I have a net runner in that location, so as long as I have a unit, the drone can exist there. And again, the Techies and drones can split into different directions. Next, I'm going to move the Techie that's sitting in the POI right here into Pacifica. And this is going to allow me to have some type of presence in here. Again, because this unit is not a solo unit, it's not going to start a firefight by moving in. Now, I could move this drone if I wanted to, but I'm going to choose to leave it where it is. As I was moving my Techies and drones, I wanted to make sure I got somebody into the POI here at City Center so I could control the business. So now I can use the back half of this action, which is to take one of these opportunities and seize it. In order to seize the opportunity, we need to make sure we can actually meet the requirement, which is to have presence in Watson or in Santo Domingo. I have it in the latter portion of that requirement, so I'm good to go. I'm going to pay 1 contraband, 1 of the 3 I have, so now I have 2 left over, and I can gain a Street Cred for each one of these Brain Dance cards that I have. And I actually already acquired one before, the Synth Coke deal, so now I have this one as well, so it'll give me 2 Street Credit, bringing me up from 5 to 7. Also, the bottom of that XBD dealer card says I can take one of these cards left over, throw it to the bottom of the deck, and draw a new one out. We got ourselves a brand new cyberware deal this time around. 3 contraband, it's an expensive one, has no requirements, and will provide you with Street Credit based on how many cyberware deals you have, and also let you upgrade one of your combat cards, but on top of it, draw additional cards when you're actually choosing which one you're going to be able to take when you do the upgrades. That's pretty good. Now, right now I'm sitting on 2 contraband and 3 Eurodollar tokens. So I think what I might do, knowing full well the Edgerunner, the opposing Edgerunner is going next, is get ready with this last card. I think I want to exchange this Cyber Psychosis card out for something a little better. So we're going to go ahead and do an upgrading of a combat card. So for 1 contraband, I've drawn 2 cards out of the combat deck. I can choose which one I want. So this one has 2 firepower. It says for casualty step, you may sacrifice 1 friendly drone in the district to kill any unit in it. That could be really, really beneficial depending on your strategy. And then here it says 2 street credit if an opponent lost any techie. That's pretty cool. And then over here, the pain editor says casualties, your opponents lose a unit even in a tie. That's cool. And then down here, 2 street credit if an opponent lost any units. You know what? I think the pain editor might be the best one. But to be honest, both those cards are fantastic, and I can absolutely see why the other one could be massively beneficial situationally. Whether you're trying to actually lose a potential combat or you're trying to win, that ability on the bottom of that other card was very cool. That's the end of my player turn. Let's replenish the decks. Opportunity gets 1 here. Corporate Elite BD. That sounds pretty awesome. You gain some street cred for each brain dance you have. Then you may spend 1 corporate secret to gain... Ooh, that's really good. That actually might be a perfect one to go after in combination with doing a net run in the future. And we have a couple new Edgerunners we could potentially hire. We have Iris here as well as Milt. You can go ahead and pause the video in order to read their triggers and their effects. The opposing Edgerunner, Johnny Silverhand's going to activate next. We draw a district card to find out where he's headed, and he's going into Haywood. The POI is open, so he's going to take it. And as we do at presence here, we're headed right into a firefight. The cards were not in my favor. I played my final combat card here, and Johnny Silverhand was lucky and got the highest firepower card with 4. Johnny won the firefight. He takes out all my units, the drone and the netrunner. Also at the bottom of my pain editor, I do not have anything that's going to give me any kind of street cred. It states 2 street cred if an opponent lost any units. That's not going to happen in a case here with the opposing Edgerunner. My hideout is going to stay put as it's not a unit, but now we're going to trigger the street cred condition for Johnny, which is a nasty one for us. It says if you have less firepower than Johnny, he gains the amount of street credit equal to the sum of all of his firepower across his combat cards. Johnny had a total of 7 firepower, bringing him from 3 all the way up to 10. It's getting real competitive out there in Night City. It's going to come back around to the player turn. I'm going to choose to activate one more time. You'll notice I have 4 combat cards in my discard. At this point, we can go ahead and replenish this hand of cards so we have all 4 available. And on top of that, for the very first time, you're going to see me activate the Netrunner disc. Let's go ahead and move some Netrunners. Now, I currently have 2 Netrunners in play. I did have 3. One of them just got taken out, but I have 1 down here, which I'm happy to leave in this fixer location. This other one sitting in the district of Westbrook, I prefer it to move into the POI up there in Westbrook. And that's because it's a data fortress, and when you head into a Netrunner activation, where we're now going to try to make a run on the net, having individuals inside of those locations is a benefit, because at the very beginning, for however many of those data fortresses you control, you're going to get 1 corporate secret token. So I have my corporate secret token, and these tokens are considered wild. They can be used as a Eurodollar token or as a contraband token, so very useful. So as you can see on screen, that you do not have to control any data fortress in order to make a net run, and you gain the 1 corporate secret per data fortress you control though. So I've got my 1. Now we're going to make an actual run on the net, and we know how many spaces we can move based on how many net runners are in play. We currently have 2, so I can either move 1 space down this track or 2 spaces. So based on us having 2 Netrunners, I can move up to 2 spaces down the track, completely ignore any space that has a triangle and exclamation mark inside of it for now. You're just moving down based on these square spaces. So I could go to either the move 1 friendly unit space or gain 1 street cred. So I bumped my street cred up by 1, and now we're going to go ahead and make a net watch roll based on whatever level we're inside of. We're inside the yellow level. It says net watch roll of 4, so if it equals 4 or is less, we are going to have this negative effect happening to us. It's also worth mentioning the Voodoo Boys card states it'll be 2 difficulty higher, so it's actually going to be a 6. Let's go ahead and make our roll for the yellow level. So it's a total of 6 or less is going to cause that yellow level to trigger. Let's go ahead and see what we get. We got ourselves a 7, just barely escaping it. I'm going to choose to take a second action. I'm going to build a hideout. This is going to cost me 2 Eurodollar tokens, which I have 3, so 2 of them spent, enabling me to place one of the hideouts. And as I take this hideout off of the track, I'm going to gain a street cred as well. I built the hideout in Santo Domingo, so I've got a total of 3 hideouts now. That'll wrap up my activate player turn, and the opposing Edgerunner is now going to go, drawing a card off the top of the district deck, and got Watson. As there was only opposing gangs in there, Johnny walks right in and blows them all away. And Johnny Silverhand gains 4 street credit for that, jumping from 10 up to 14, now well in the lead. And he's also going to remove from the game the topmost face-up opportunity card, which in this case is the Body Shop Cyber Tuning. And that, my friends, wraps up part number 1 of Cyberpunk 2077 Gangs of Night City from Come On Games. I really hope this video series is helping you make an informed decision on the game and or helping you get the game to the table that much easier to see it in action. Now, as we sum up the very tail end of this video, I'll let you know exactly where we sit with the street cred. We have Johnny Silverhand currently sitting with 14. We have the opposing gang, the Voodoo Boys, at 11, and I am currently at 9 with the Tiger Claws. So I have my work cut out for me to try to pull off a victory in the finale. Hopefully you'll join me and let me know in the comments down below if you saw anything. And also be sure to check the video description and pin comment, as I'll place any FYIs and corrections there. Anything we need to do going into the next video, I will make mention of. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.